Welcome, horror lovers. I'm Pete, and today we're going to embark on a journey through some of the darkness. If you're new here, subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any terrifying stories. The Japanese legend of the cow's head, Ushi no Kubi, or Gyu no Kubi, is a fascinating and eerie tale steeped in supernatural elements, symbolism, and moral lessons. It is a part of the broader collection of traditional Japanese folklore, and like many myths and legends, it has numerous regional variations. The central concept, however, remains largely the same. A disembodied cow's head appears as a mysterious and terrifying symbol, often associated with a curse, punishment, or inevitable fate. The Ushi no Kubi legend typically centers around a man, often depicted as greedy, selfish, or dishonest, who makes a deal or pact with a supernatural entity or spirit, hoping to gain wealth, power, or success. The price for these desires, however, is steep and comes in the form of the appearance of a cow's head, which may haunt the individual and lead to misfortune, sickness, madness, or even death. In many versions of the legend, the cow's head is a grotesque and frightening apparition, often described as floating and separate from the body. It is typically a symbol of misdeeds or unnatural actions, and its appearance signifies a punishment for these actions. The head might appear suddenly and repeatedly, almost like an inescapable force, tormenting the individual who encounters it. The more the person tries to rid themselves of the head, the more it seems to return, symbolizing an unavoidable fate tied to their wrongdoings. The cow's head itself can be considered an emblem of karmic retribution, an inevitable consequence of a wrong committed, such as greed, dishonesty, or exploitation. The supernatural aspect of the legend reinforces the idea that one cannot escape the moral consequences of their actions, and nature, or the universe, will find a way to restore balance. One of the most striking aspects of the Ushi no Kubi legend is the supernatural nature of the cow's head. In many versions, the head is associated with yokai, supernatural spirits, or monsters, or even local deities. Sometimes, it may take on the characteristics of an oni, a type of demon in Japanese folklore, further emphasizing the terrifying and malevolent nature of the creature. The appearance of the cow's head might occur in rural settings, where the protagonist, a farmer, a villager, or an ordinary person, finds themselves in an extraordinary situation, such as making a pact with a supernatural being or violating natural laws in some way. In these versions, the head serves as a manifestation of the consequences of tampering with forces beyond human understanding or control. The head may also be described as a floating, eerie object that seems to have a life of its own. This detached nature of the head, cut off from its body, makes it all the more unnerving and symbolic of the fractured, unnatural state of the protagonist's own life or spirit. In some tellings, it appears as an uncontrollable force, further reinforcing the idea that no matter how hard the person tries to avoid or suppress it, the head will always return. The image of a disembodied cow's head carries a deep and multi-layered symbolism. The cow itself, in many cultures, is often a symbol of sacrifice, labor, and provision. In Japan, cows are sometimes associated with agricultural life and the rhythms of nature. A severed cow's head, therefore, represents a violation of the natural order, an imbalance created by human actions. The detached head could also symbolize alienation and loss of identity. It is not a complete or whole being, but rather a fragmented, incomplete entity. This could reflect the internal fragmentation of a person who has strayed from moral principles or who has become disconnected from their humanity due to selfish or greedy actions. The head, bereft of its body, becomes an image of loss, whether of the person's integrity, humanity, or moral compass. In a broader sense, the cow's head also represents an unavoidable consequence of actions, karma. In many traditional Asian philosophies, including Shinto and Buddhism, karma is the belief that one's actions in life will inevitably return to them, either in this life or the next. The appearance of the cow's head may symbolize this return of karmic debt, an inevitable reckoning that the person cannot escape. The Ushi no Kubi legend can be seen as a cautionary tale about greed, dishonesty, and the pursuit of selfish desires. The disembodied head often appears as a direct result of the protagonist's wrongdoing, typically some form of exploitation or dishonesty. It is a manifestation of the punishment that follows actions that disrupt the natural balance or ignore moral and ethical boundaries. In this sense, the head is not an antagonist in the traditional sense. It does not have an active will to harm. Instead, it is a symbol of fate or cosmic justice. The person who encounters the cow's head may have initially sought something through questionable means, only to realize too late that they have unleashed a force they cannot control. The head represents the inescapable result of their desires, serving as a reminder that no wrongdoing goes unnoticed by the natural or spiritual order. The supernatural cow's head, with its otherworldly qualities, can also symbolize how the protagonist's moral failings affect not just themselves, but also the world around them. It may bring misfortune or suffering, not only to the individual but to others, underscoring the interconnectedness of all beings and the ripple effects of selfishness and greed. Regional variations of the legend. Like many folklore tales, the Ushi no Kubi story varies across Japan, with different regions telling slightly different versions of the legend. In some regions, the cow's head may be connected to specific types of yokai, such as a malevolent spirit or demon that seeks to avenge some wrong. In others, it might be linked to local folklore figures like the Jorogumo, the spider woman, or Tengu, mountain spirits, who act as manipulators or punishers. In some versions, the cow's head is not an isolated floating object, but part of a sequence of events involving a real cow, perhaps one that is wronged or killed. The animal transforms into a vengeful spirit, a cautionary figure for those who harm nature or break sacred rules. This emphasizes the theme that harm done to nature or to innocent beings comes with inevitable consequences, often in a form that is far more dangerous than anticipated. Additionally, some versions of the legend involve the appearance of natural disasters, such as storms, plagues, or pestilence, symbolizing the chaos and destruction that follow human greed or the violation of natural laws. In these versions, the cow's head becomes a physical manifestation of the disorder unleashed by the individual's actions, reminding them, and the audience, that there is a cost to tampering with forces beyond human comprehension. Conclusion. The legend of the Ushi no Kubi, or the cow's head, is a potent and eerie tale with deep symbolic and moral layers. It addresses fundamental human themes such as greed, moral responsibility, the consequences of selfish actions, and the inescapability of fate. The supernatural element of the floating, disembodied cow's head is both unsettling and intriguing, emphasizing the fragmentation and alienation that comes from breaking the natural or moral order. In its various forms, the story serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that the pursuit of desires without consideration of the consequences can lead to a fate far worse than expected. It is a reminder that no wrong goes unpunished, and that the universe, whether through spiritual forces or karmic law, will always find a way to restore balance, often in the most unsettling and unavoidable manner. The legend of the Kushtaka is one of the most fascinating and terrifying tales from Alaska, deeply rooted in the beliefs of the indigenous peoples of the region, particularly the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian. The Kushtaka is often described as a mystical creature that inhabits the vast and impenetrable wilderness and icy waters of Alaska. Its name, in many versions, is translated as man-otter, a direct reference to its appearance, which combines that of an otter with distorted human-like traits. It is a hybrid of aquatic creature and supernatural entity, capable of deceiving, manipulating, and hunting its victims. The Kushtaka, in its most common form, is described as a furry creature with the body of an otter, but with a grotesque, distorted human face and limbs. In some versions, the creature may be entirely human or entirely animal, but it always possesses an unsettling aura. Its hands are said to be long and thin, almost like claws, and its fur is dense and dark, adapted to the cold, harsh environment. However, the Kushtaka's supernatural nature makes it even more terrifying. It has the ability to shapeshift, taking on both human and otter forms, thus confusing its victims and creating illusions. In many legends, the Kushtaka is known to emit a sound similar to that of a crying or screaming child, which lures unsuspecting travelers into deadly traps. When the victim approaches, the Kushtaka can transform into an otter or a familiar human figure, with the intent of deceiving and capturing the unknowing. The Kushtaka's role in mythology. Within the belief systems of the indigenous peoples of Alaska, the Kushtaka is not only a terrifying creature, but also plays a moral and spiritual role. For the Tlingit and other tribes, the Kushtaka was seen as a guardian spirit of the waters and nature, responsible for punishing those who disrespected the natural world. It was also viewed as a being that tested the character of people, especially hunters and fishermen, by manipulating their emotions and leading them into error. The Kushtaka was often associated with the spirits of people who had died and become lost in the forests and rivers of Alaska. Some accounts claim that the Kushtaka could steal the soul of a person, or even transform them into one of its own followers, forcing them to live as a wild creature, trapped forever between the world of the living and the dead. This transformation could serve as a punishment for those who were reckless or disrespectful to nature. Tales and witnesses. There are numerous accounts of encounters with the Kushtaka, particularly among the indigenous communities of Alaska, but also from hunters and fishermen from other parts of the world who ventured into the cold waters of the region. Here are a few notable stories that have been passed down through generations. Tale 1. Old Bill's Encounter with the Kushtaka. In 1931, a hunter named Bill Anderson, known as Old Bill among the residents of a small coastal village, shared a terrifying experience he had during one of his expeditions. Bill was hunting in a remote area of Alaska near a frozen river when he heard an unmistakable sound, the cry of a child. Intrigued and concerned for the safety of a potentially lost child, he followed the sound for miles until he arrived at a small clearing. There, he found a strange figure, a woman who seemed to be crying with large, glazed eyes and pale skin. As he approached, the woman suddenly turned, revealing herself to be not human, but a hybrid figure with a distorted face and limbs that appeared more like claws. Bill froze in fear but managed to retreat before the creature attacked. In the years that followed, he claimed that the Kushtaka was responsible for the deaths of many fishermen and hunters in the area, who either drowned in the icy waters or got lost in the thick mists of the harsh winter. Tale 2. The Mystery of Fox Point. In 1954, a scientific exploration expedition was sent to the interior of Alaska to map the region's fauna and flora. During the journey, one of the scientists, John Ferguson, and his team became lost after a snowstorm. When they finally reached a small, abandoned cabin at Fox Point, they noticed strange marks on the walls and a series of large footprints that didn't appear to belong to any known animal. That night, they heard distant sounds of screams, similar to the cries of a child, and by morning, they discovered that one of their team members had disappeared without a trace. The story was recorded in official reports, but the team never found a satisfactory explanation for the disappearance. Some of the more experienced members of the expedition, especially those with roots in Alaska, suggested that the disappearance was related to the Kushtaka, a creature known to disorient and mislead anyone who ventured into its domain. Tale 3. Young Hunter Kelt's Experience. One of the more recent stories of encounters with the Kushtaka comes from a local hunter named Kelt, who, in 2011, was attacked while fishing on a remote lake near Anchorage. Kelt was in his canoe, fishing alone, when he heard a familiar voice calling his name. At first, he thought it was a lost friend, but he soon realized the voice was strange, shifting between that of a child and an adult. When he looked toward the shore, he saw a figure in a dark cloak. As he approached, the figure turned, and Kelt saw a creature with the body of an otter, but a human-like face. Kelt immediately paddled away, but the Kushtaka pursued him until he was able to reach a safer spot. He later reported that during the attack, the Kushtaka tried to sink his canoe with supernatural force. Kelt never returned to fish in that lake and has since become a vocal advocate for the ancient stories, warning others about the dangers of the Kushtaka. The Kushtaka in modern times. Although belief in the Kushtaka remains strong among Alaska's indigenous communities, many modern hunters and fishermen treat the legend with skepticism. However, the stories continue to be told, especially on cold winter nights when the wind cuts through the mountains and the waters of Alaska whisper ancient secrets. For the original peoples, the Kushtaka remains a reminder that the natural world and the spirits that inhabit it are powerful forces that must be respected. The boundary between the visible and the invisible world is thin and often dangerous. Some questions, however, remain unanswered. Can the accounts of mysterious disappearances and encounters with strange creatures be explained by myth and legend? Or is there something more, something beyond human comprehension, that lurks in the deep frozen waters of Alaska? The Kushtaka, with its shifting form and deceptive tactics, continues to be a shadow in the tales and stories of the region, keeping the legend of a spirit guardian alive, one that should never be challenged. Conclusion. The legend of the Kushtaka is much more than a simple horror story from Alaska. It reflects a worldview where respect for nature and the spirits of the waters and forests is essential to survival. Over the centuries, the Kushtaka has served as a warning, a lesson, and a mystical presence for those who venture into Alaska's wild, remote landscapes. Whether as a vengeful spirit or a guardian of the waters, the Kushtaka remains a living legend, deeply rooted in the culture of Alaska's indigenous peoples. Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching.